Guys who gave the crazy girl a chance. What happened? The relationship started off okay, though she was often selfish and lazy. Eventually, she developed a drinking problem, which later turned into a daily weed habit. While I know people who smoke regularly and are calm, she became paranoid, and it seemed like every day turned into an argument. To keep it short, she started preventing me from moving between rooms when I tried to walk away from an argument, would spit at me, throw things, and even broke a door over my back. Just typical crazy girlfriend behavior. I never fought back, and I tried to avoid arguments because I just wanted peace, which is why I'd try to walk away. But she wouldn't let me leave, even locking me in the house once, and then grabbing my foot as I tried to climb out the window. If I ever tried to move her out of the way, she'd scream that I was hurting or pushing her, making sure the neighbors heard. The strangest part is, despite all of that, I stayed with her, and we even tried for a child. Then, she cheated. She told him we were broken up when we weren't. When I found out, she claimed she'd split with him and suggested we go to couples counseling. She even turned our friends against me with lies. Then she got pregnant. She told the other guy it was his, and told me she didn't know, even though she knew it was his when she slept with me. She refused to leave the house, wouldn't let me sell it for months, and when she finally agreed, she made sure it was a mess for showings. She didn't fix the broken door she caused or pay for it, and I had to pack up her stuff since she wouldn't. She even took things I'd paid for, like the washing machine, both beds, and the fridge, leaving me with nothing. Now I hear she's trapping her new boyfriend in a loveless relationship, has hit and kicked him, and has a second kid on the way. She's also sleeping on the sofa because she's too lazy to get the 2 beds she still owns out of storage. I'm now in a loving relationship, and honestly, I'm glad she cheated. Looking back, I can't believe I put up with all that. Story 2. I was warned by friends who knew her that she wasn't someone I should date, but I didn't listen. She gaslit me so much that I started questioning my own sanity. We fought constantly, like the time I asked if I could drive her car because she seemed really drunk. You'd have thought I'd done something terrible, the way she flipped out. She sat in her car for an hour afterward. We eventually broke up, and she slept with a few of my so-called friends. That was a wake-up call that not everyone around you is truly a friend, so I cut the toxic people out of my life. I focused on getting in the best shape of my life, had fun dating some really great girls, and ended up with a new girlfriend. But I was still dealing with the emotional fallout from my ex, so that relationship didn't work out. I don't use the word crazy lightly. Most of my exes were cool, maybe even less crazy than me. But that one, she was completely out of her mind. Story 3. One of my best friends took a leap of faith with a wild, unpredictable girl 23 years ago. Fast forward to today, they've been married for 22 years. Along the way, he discovered an unexpected perk of marrying someone with a touch of crazy. She's a pro at keeping his overbearing mother at a safe distance. It's like having a built-in buffer, and he couldn't be more grateful. Story 4. We were together for over a year and even lived together. At first, it was pure magic, crazy, all-consuming love. But soon, the red flags started waving. She became possessive, her anger would explode over the smallest things, and the lies started piling up. But the most bizarre part? She would fake full-body seizures whenever she was confronted with something she didn't want to hear or deal with. Imagine having a heated argument and suddenly, bam, she'd collapse into what looked like a seizure. At first, it was terrifying and I genuinely thought something was wrong. I did everything I could to help. But over time, her story didn't add up. The tipping point came when I talked to her sister, who straight up told me, she's never had a seizure in her life. What are you talking about? Even with all that, I ignored the obvious. Love, or maybe lust, makes you do some wild things. Then, one day, she just left me, no warning, no explanation. And yes, I'll admit it, the bedroom activities was absolutely incredible. So incredible that I went back 3 years later, thinking maybe it could work this time. Spoiler, it couldn't. The craziness had only gotten worse. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. Story 5. My buddy made the mistake of letting his crazy ex back into his life. When he refused to give her the oxys she demanded, things went completely off the rails. She bashed her own head against the wall, called the cops, and got him arrested. While he was stuck in custody, she went on a rampage and trashed his apartment. The charges against him were eventually dropped, but not before she caused thousands of dollars in damage and left him drowning in legal fees. Because it was a domestic violence case, an automatic restraining order barred him from his own apartment while the charges were being resolved. Meanwhile, she got to live there rent-free, treating his place like her personal crash pad. He had to rent another apartment just to have somewhere to stay. To make things worse, the landlord was completely useless. He didn't even live in Canada or speak English, so there was no help on that front. In the end, my friend finally got his apartment back and cleared his name, but she walked away scot-free with nothing more than a 3-day mental health evaluation. Lesson learned: don't stick your dong in crazy. Story 6. When I met her, she was stuck in a rut, sleeping all day, grouchy, with no real hobbies or direction. Despite all that, we connected, and I was happy to be with her. I saw potential in her and wanted to help her turn things around. Over the next 7 years, I gave it everything I had. I invested time, money, therapy sessions, endless encouragement, and countless pep talk. Slowly but surely, things started to change. She began reconnecting with friends, landed a better job, and even developed an active interest in hobbies and passions she'd once ignored. I thought we were building a future together. Then she cheated on me. Story 7. Our relationship was a roller coaster of constant, chaotic fights. One night, during one of our worst screaming matches, she stormed out of the house. I didn't know where she went, but it turned out she went straight to another guy's place. They partied hard that night, and she ended up taking some bad LSD. The consequences were devastating. She never fully recovered from that trip. Since 1998, she's been in a mental health facility, and her condition is so severe that she can barely speak now. It's heartbreaking to think how quickly everything spiraled out of control. Story 8. This didn't happen to me, but to a buddy of mine. He dated this girl for 3 years and completely turned her life around during that time. Therapy, a steady job, starting community college, finally finding the right medication. He supported her through it all. Her life was on the upswing, and even we, his friends, who had dreaded being around her for the first 2.5 years, started to see the change. She became tolerable, dare I say enjoyable, to be around. After 3 years of his unwavering support, encouragement, and patience through all her drama, she decided to leave him. Not for anything he did, but because she found a trust fund baby who, in her words, could better provide for her. Fast forward a couple of years, my buddy ran into her again. Things didn't work out with the trust fund guy, but she managed to keep her life on track. She's still doing well, and I can't deny I'm glad she's stable now. But the way she left my friend so easily, after everything he did to help her, just because someone else had more money? Yeah, screw her for that. Story 9. We had a great start, but things quickly took a turn as she began messing with my head. We'd have constant fights over things she believed I did, even though I never did any of them. She would make up scenarios in her mind, accusing me of things I had never even been involved in, like doing things with other women before we even met. None of it was true, but in her mind it was, and nothing I said could change that. This became a regular occurrence, at least once a week. I've always been transparent with my partners, but she made me feel like I needed to hide things because she would create problems out of thin air for no reason. It escalated into jealousy and manipulation, and eventually, even my family noticed the negative impact it was having on me. I'd look miserable all the time. I reached a breaking point and ended the relationship. As soon as I did, I felt a huge sense of relief, no longer being gaslit and emotionally drained. It's a shame because the good times were truly great, but the bad times took a serious toll. It took me 2 years to fully recover from that experience. Story 10. I dated a girl with BPD, and while she was always kind to me, rejection hit her incredibly hard whenever she faced it. We quickly developed a strong emotional bond, and we had a great time together. Ultimately, I broke up with her because of her drug habit, which led to several run-ins with the law. Despite the challenges, I don't regret dating her because of her condition. Story 11. I tried for 2 or 3 years, on and off, with this girl. She'd be excited about dating me at first, but after 3 or 4 weeks she'd bail. During all of this, she went through extensive searches for alternative therapies. Not to knock them, but it involved some pretty strange potions, herbs, and an acupuncturist who, in my opinion, was manipulating her romantically. She even went to a retreat where they weren't allowed to speak for 2 weeks, ate very little, had to sit in one position for hours listening to tapes from a man who seemed to be brainwashing them. I begged her to switch therapists, offered to pay and go with her, whatever it took. Towards the end, she became convinced that her Brazilian housemaid could see spirits, and she was terrified that our houses were haunted. She broke up with me again and I blocked her, but she emailed me from her work account, begging for another chance. We started seeing each other again. Over the years, I did everything. Supported her emotionally, helped with home repairs and renovations, took her on the dates and adventures she dreamed of, and was always patient and caring. But then, she started getting strange again. I noticed red flags. Weekend trips with friends, holidays where family was invited, but I later found out she had an old friend with her. Once again, I begged her to get help and be open with me. Then, at 2 a.m., I got an email from her saying she'd been dating 2 men at once, that she was sorry, and that she was going to choose the other guy. I suspect she was pregnant, honestly, because things went silent. A few days later, she announced to our mutual friends that she'd gotten married, and there was a reception in just a few days. It really stung how many friends supported her after everything she'd done. I still won't talk to most of them. I didn't keep track of everything, but I heard about a baby shower after the wedding. I'm glad they moved 2 hours away. Never again. I can handle mental illness, but not when it's untreated and involves secrecy and lies. Story 12. I nearly went bankrupt trying to keep up with her lifestyle. To be fair, I was an extremely late bloomer and had just come out as trans. She was well off and eager to show me the world. I had missed out on a lot growing up, so I made up for it in full with her. We went on a week-long all-inclusive Caribbean cruise, a week-long trip to Vegas where we saw about 9 shows in 5 days, gambled on the Strip, and even had shots of some of the finest cognac. Though, to be honest, I prefer the taste of cheaper stuff. When we weren't traveling, we were taking spontaneous road trips or making a name for ourselves at local bars and clubs well into the early hours of the morning. Oh, and we also went to a Burning Man event, not the big one in New Mexico, but still a large regional gathering. There's a lot more I probably don't remember, thanks to the massive amount of alcohol, smoke, and occasional hallucinogens involved. One memory I do have is sitting in a hotel hot tub with her, surrounded by empty cocktail glasses, and realizing that this was the rock and roll lifestyle. We broke up almost exactly 1 year later. She got bored and moved on, still living that same lifestyle. What got me through the year was pure adrenaline and, of course, love. The breakup hit me hard. I'm currently rebuilding my finances and doing the work to figure out which parts of that lifestyle I want to keep and which parts one want to leave behind. And to top it all off, she was my first relationship, ever. Story 13. She played mind games with me, slowly introducing bits of crazy until I lowered my expectations of what I could reasonably expect from her. The first red flag was how she constantly cycled through new guys who would become friends, but clearly wanted to sleep with her. After a while, I figured out her pattern. She would destroy every friendship after about a month, so she'd move on to a new group of guys to harvest their attention, just enough for a few weeks of texts and validation. Her circle was almost exclusively male because women couldn't tolerate her for long, but she knew how to keep guys around for that constant boost. She had about a month-long window with each new guy. When she got bored with me, she created a fake Discord profile and messaged me as though she were an ex-girlfriend, claiming I had used women. But everything about the messages felt off, and it immediately seemed like it was either her or one of her friends trying to stir drama so someone could come in as the comforting hero. The aftermath? Now I'm stuck with a sexual fixation she introduced me to, something that most women would never tolerate, let alone enjoy. She liked to be treated with extreme detachment, almost as if I didn't care whether she lived or not, and no sane woman is going to let me do that. I guess that was her way of compensating for her personality, through hypersexuality. Story 14. I spent a few months at her place, just hanging out, building bonfires, drinking, detoxing from all the drugs we used to do, and bonding. It felt almost like a dream. We both grew a lot during that time, but then one day I found out that the anxiety meds she'd been giving me since pretty much the first week of knowing her weren't anxiety meds at all. They were painkillers. I had been taking them daily for the past 6 to 7 months, all while drinking. I was furious when I found out and confronted her. She apologized but never really gave me an explanation. It took me a week before I even felt like talking to her again, and when I did, she acted super apologetic, like she felt bad about it. But the next time I saw her, she invited me over, and within 30 minutes of me being there, she went off to bang some random dude she met on a cruise 5 years ago. I was pissed, but being the tolerant idiot I am, I just thought, well, you're a mess, but you're a mess I'm kind of okay with. So, I decided to stay friends and put any idea of us being together out of my mind. Then one day we hung out at my place with a few of my friends, smoking. She went inside to use the bathroom, and my buddy followed her to get some water. After about 15 minutes, I thought, what the hell is taking so long? So, I went inside, only to find them doing it in my bed. I kicked them both out and never saw either of them again. That was the last time I pursued a woman I actually liked. I learned my lesson. I should stay away from women I like, because it seems like I'm drawn to crazy, toxic ones. The crazier, the better, according to my track record. Story 15. I'll buck the trend and say the sex was better than average, but not mind-blowing. Her interest in bringing other women into the fold is what really sold it to me. As for what happened, we tried to make it work for a couple of years, but things took a turn when she made some serious accusations against me that were easily disproven. Here's a tip. If you're trying to frame someone, maybe don't claim something happened when your target was at work, on camera the entire time. Story 16. I stayed for 7 years. She was incredible in bed, but the relationship was full of manipulation and emotional abuse. A few years after we broke up, I learned she had borderline personality disorder, which explained a lot of the behaviors, but the whole experience still left me broken. Now, 7 years later, I'm still single by choice. I've met women and had a couple of friends with benefits, but I struggle to settle down. Part of me wants to, but another part is still afraid of wasting my time. Therapy revealed that I have severe PTSD from the relationship. In fact, just seeing her number would trigger a full-blown anxiety attack. Even years later, she would still reach out when her life was falling apart, knowing I'd be there to support her. I've since learned the hard way that being kind to people who aren't emotionally healthy can ultimately destroy you. I hope one day I can open my heart again, but for now, I'm content being single and seeing women on my own terms. Story 17. She was incredibly abusive toward me every day, physically, emotionally, and mentally. She would throw furniture at me, smash glass objects, and even throw knives sometimes. She lied to me, cheated on me regularly, stole from me, and turned her family against me. Eventually, she manipulated everyone, even convincing my friends that I was the abuser, despite them witnessing her abuse firsthand. Some of them even went to court with me to testify against her in a domestic assault case, after she was arrested in front of my friends and her family. I ended up with an order of protection against both her and her father. She later married someone who looked and acted similarly to me, even choosing a person with my name. I'm so relieved to have gotten away from her. Since the start of 2020, my life has only gotten better, and it's been a huge improvement without her in it. Story 18. She went out with my roommate and ended up drinking heavily. When she returned to our apartment, she crawled into bed with me and said she loved me. I told her I wasn't at that point yet. She became incredibly volatile, throwing things and screaming. I managed to get her out of the apartment, but she went down the hall banging on everyone's door. She made her way outside and started screaming again before wandering off. The police showed up and, despite the situation, threatened to arrest me for something ridiculous. I reassured them I wanted no part in what was going on. They started looking for her. Eventually, they found pieces of her clothing scattered in the parking lot. Following the trail, they found her passed out on a playground slide in her inners. When they tried to approach her, she fought them off. The next day, I heard a knock at my door. It was her, asking for her phone and purse, saying she'd never come back again. That was the last time I saw her. I often wonder if I could have helped her. Story 19. This isn't my story, but it's my brother's. He broke up with his controlling, manipulative girlfriend in November. Then, he got a message from her mom, begging him to drive her daughter to the Midwest to be with her family for Christmas because she was worried about her driving alone. Being the kind and naive guy he is, my brother agreed. During the trip, they ended up getting back together, and she got pregnant. Shortly after, she pressured him into proposing and even picked out the ring she wanted him to buy. Years later, with another kid in the picture, my brother learned the truth. It was actually his girlfriend who had used her mom's phone to send him that message. Her mom was never worried about her daughter driving alone. Fortunately, they haven't gotten married yet, but they've been engaged for years. I'm not a fan of her. Story 20. I dated a friend of mine's acquaintance without knowing she had some serious issues. Toward the end of our first date, she started rubbing her belly, and I initially thought it might be some kind of belly fetish. But then, in a squeaky voice, she said, "I've got a secret," and I asked what it was. She told me she was pregnant with my baby. Needless to say, I ended the date pretty quickly. We hadn't even kissed or had any real contact, aside from that awkward arm-over-the-shoulder moment. She told my friend that she was pregnant with my child, and of course, my friend was totally confused. Later on, she started carrying a baby doll around, claiming it was our child. A few months later, she showed up while I was eating at a restaurant with my mom, pointing at her and asking me who this girl was, referring to my mom. Now, she's married to one of my friends and has been for 6 years. They have 3 baby dolls of their own, no real kids, and she works as a babysitter. Honestly, I have no idea what happened to the baby doll she used to claim was our kid, and frankly, I don't want to know. Story 21. In the 80s, my dad had this girlfriend. They had been dating for a few months, and at the time, he was living on his own in Connecticut. She was always a bit possessive and wanted him to spend all his time with her. One day, he decided to host a grill-out with some friends at his place. When she found out, she showed up at his apartment, grabbed the lit charcoal grill, and threw it at him through the sliding glass door. Thankfully, no one was hurt, and he told her it was over and asked her to leave. The next day, her father came over to my dad's apartment, begging him to take her back. But my dad refused. I think the girl might have had some untreated mental health struggles. I've never seen a picture of her, and my dad never talks about her. He hasn't mentioned her since then, but I still wonder what happened to her. Story 22. Great question. My mom always told me it wasn't my place to try and fix the girl's condition, so I made it clear to her that I'd be there as long as she was committed to therapy. She stuck with it, and we ended up getting married and spending 30 wonderful years together. About a year ago, she left me, saying she felt too dependent on me, almost like I was her father. Honestly, I'm happy for her, but I do miss her a lot. I've been dating other women, but nothing quite compares. Story 23. The relationship started off okay, though she was often selfish and lazy. Eventually, she developed a drinking problem, which later turned into a daily weed habit. While I know people who smoke regularly and are calm, she became paranoid, and it seemed like every day turned into an argument. To keep it short, she started preventing me from moving between rooms when I tried to walk away from an argument, would spit at me, throw things, and even broke a door over my back. Just typical crazy girlfriend behavior. I never fought back, and I tried to avoid arguments because I just wanted peace, which is why I'd try to walk away. But she wouldn't let me leave, even locking me in the house once, and then grabbing my foot as I tried to climb out the window. If I ever tried to move her out of the way, she'd scream that I was hurting or pushing her, making sure the neighbors heard. The strangest part is, despite all of that, I stayed with her, and we even tried for a child. Then, she cheated. She told him we were broken up when we weren't. When I found out, she claimed she'd split with him, and suggested we go to couples counseling. She even turned our friends against me with lies. Then she got pregnant. She told the other guy it was his, and told me she didn't know, even though she knew it was his when she slept with me. She refused to leave the house, wouldn't let me sell it for months, and when she finally agreed, she made sure it was a mess for showings. She didn't fix the broken door she caused or pay for it, and I had to pack up her stuff since she wouldn't. She even took things I'd paid for, like the washing machine, both beds, and the fridge, leaving me with nothing. Now I hear she's trapping her new boyfriend in a loveless relationship, has hit and kicked him, and has a second kid on the way. She's also sleeping on the sofa because she's too lazy to get the 2 beds she still owns out of storage. I'm now in a loving relationship, and honestly, I'm glad she cheated. Looking back, I can't believe I put up with all that. Story 24. She was unstable, and things got worse when she started getting involved with people I knew. First, it was one of my acquaintances, and then another close friend of mine, both of whom she met through me. She ended up breaking into people's homes, physically and mentally abusing us, and manipulating my family into moving in with us. I'm not exaggerating. Eventually, she moved on to a new social circle. Even though all of this happened over 12 years ago, she still comes up in conversation. I recently found out that just days after I finally broke up with her, she hooked up with one of my now best friends multiple times before moving on to date another guy a few weeks later. Despite everything, she did have a great sex that kept us fooled for a while, but in the end, it was clear she had us all tricked. Story 25. I was still in love with her ex. She kept a drawer full of notebooks she'd written to and about him over the years. They had a kid together, but he cheated on her and left before the child was born, over a decade ago. She'd slept with a number of guys since. Despite all this, she was really cool and totally my type, so I dove in headfirst. She was great in bed, but there were a lot of strange things going on. She was really possessive, with a lot of double standards. I couldn't have female friends, even on Facebook, or hang out with my guys without her accusing me of cheating. I never did anything wrong, never talked to anyone in a way that wasn't appropriate, but she would accuse me of cheating all the time. I had my own place, but I'd stay at hers for weeks. Then out of nowhere, she'd accuse me of being with someone else, someone from work, a woman on my way home. But she had tons of guy friends on Facebook, and had excuses for why she didn't delete them. Her ex would call her repeatedly if she didn't answer. She made excuses for him too, and even pushed their kid down when he had him but justified it. I told her how it made me feel, but she'd just accuse me of something else and kick me out. A few days later, she'd call me back over, and this cycle went on every week or so. One night, a customer gave me her number, and we hung out. Her ex found out and held it over my head as cheating, even though it wasn't. She treated her kid like her husband, had no boundaries, and gave him everything he wanted, or he'd throw a tantrum. I tried to step in, help with his grades, teach him basic things like cooking and how to tie his shoes, but it never seemed to be enough. I'd bring snacks and little gifts home for them both, pick up the kid from school so she didn't have to, and cooked and cleaned. But it never mattered. No matter how much I tried, I was always accused of cheating and kicked out. I quit drinking for her after 20 years, but she didn't support me. Instead, she accused me of still drinking. She'd go through my phone, so I started going through hers, finding new guys showing up all the time. But there was never a single woman in my phone. I knew something was wrong, but I could never find concrete proof. Story 26. I didn't text my ex back one night while I was working late and forgot to respond. I woke up to her banging on my window at 5 a.m., yelling, "Who's with you?" A couple of days later, I went to her place, and she started crying, accusing me of hitting her. She called her cousin over, and the guy wanted to fight me because she lied and told him I hit her. I just left the situation. The next day, I found out she had been using prescription painkillers, and that was the final straw for me. I decided to call it quits. A lot more happened after that, but even though she was hot, it just wasn't worth it. Story 27. She staged 2 break-ins when things started to fall apart, trying to keep items she felt were owed to her for being in the relationship. She also used to randomly take things from me, manipulating me into becoming dependent on her. She would often sneak drinks from my drink in addition to what I would get her when we went out, and she'd get drunk. She constantly tested the relationship. Her excuse was staying out late and leaving me with the kids. She was also the first partner to ever cause me physical harm. The intimacy was only good once or twice, with the first time being the best. Most of the time, she was very entitled and didn't put much effort in. For example, I'd give her a massage for over an hour, but she'd spend the entire time criticizing and micromanaging what I was doing. Then, she would be too tired to reciprocate, and any teasing about it later would just lead to more focus on her and another empty promise to make it up later. Story 28. I ended the relationship because I couldn't even get a moment to myself. She was constantly monitoring everything I did, day and night. After that, she stalked me for a year, showing up outside my house and sending endless messages, even sending explicit pictures of herself. She even went as far as to fabricate a story that we were siblings who were separated after being orphaned. My actual parents are alive and well, so I have no idea where that story came from. It finally stopped when a family member found out and reported it to her legal representative, telling her to back off and to issue a restraining order against her. Story 29. She locked me in her apartment because she believed I was leaving too much and wouldn't accept that work was the reason I had to leave every day. She also complained that I was prioritizing my children over her. We broke up, but months later, she messaged me after seeing a picture of a girl on my social media, accusing me of cheating on her. Even years later, she still reaches out occasionally, asking me not to post about my life on social media because it makes her upset. Story 30. This happened back in college, so it's been a while. She told me she had broken up with her boyfriend, and I had just ended a toxic 2-year relationship. Not long after, she made me promise to keep it a secret. Toward the end of the summer, she got back together with her ex, and he moved in as a roommate in a house with 7 guys. A couple of months later, after a few drinks, I told him what had happened, and he lost it. Turns out, he had been on a cruise that summer and hooked up with a lot of people, and she had been guilt-tripping him for it. After that, she went on a rampage on my social media, accusing me of assault, until my roommate stepped in and made her take down her post. She was hot, but all that drama was definitely not worth it. Keeping that secret from my roommate was tough. Story 31. I have a wild story to share, but it's not about me. It's about a guy I knew in college. It's a long one, but here's the short version. Things got so intense that the girl would literally follow him around 24/7, always keeping her hand on him when they were out in public. She would go through his phone whenever he used it and even flipped out once when a random bikini influencer showed up on his Instagram feed. The craziest part? She would accompany him to the bathroom, literally stand there while he used it, whether they were at home or out in public. When he finally tried to end things, she bombarded him with texts to the point where he had to get a new number. She knew his entire schedule and started showing up at his classes and other places. Eventually, he had to file for a restraining order. She even tried to get him expelled from school by falsely accusing him SA, but he was able to prove the accusation was false by showing all the text history. After graduating, he left the state as quickly as possible. Story 32. This girl was a total mess and I missed way too many red flags. Eventually, she lied and filed a restraining order against me. She received some disturbing messages and assumed they were from me, even though we had already broken up weeks prior. She was a white woman, and the judge was also white, so as a non-white person, I felt like I didn't stand a chance. On top of that, she was allowed to make a statement, but the judge didn't even ask if I had one to give. The whole thing took less than 20 minutes, and the judge just believed her without question. I've never had any legal issues. No complaints at work, no problems with any of my past relationship. But this crazy situation with the restraining order was just unbelievable. If you're dating someone like this, especially if you're not white, be careful. Trust your instincts. Story 33. We were friends with benefits for a while, but she would flirt with other guys in front of me because I wouldn't date her. Eventually, I thought maybe making her my girlfriend would improve things, but it only made it worse. She tried to turn me against some of my closest friends, made me look foolish multiple times, and would do things to provoke me, then act like I was the one overreacting. There were so many situations I couldn't believe, including one night where she almost got me into a fight with a guy because he supposedly said something mean to her friend. When I finally realized things would never get better, I broke up with her. In response, she hurt herself in front of me and threatened to drive off a cliff. I called one of her many close guy friends, and he assured me she was on her way to his house, so I didn't need to worry. It took me a long time to process the confusion of it all, and even longer to trust someone else again. I did learn a lot from the experience, but I wouldn't say it was worth it. Story 34. She pretended to have did to manipulate me into revealing things, using the threat of her protective altar berating me and blaming me for her self-harm and suicidal thoughts when I didn't comply with her demands. She also had a strong dislike for our mutual friend because I preferred spending time with them over her, which, in hindsight, was a toxic dynamic. I recognize that I am partially to blame for some of the things that happened during that time. There was a lot of love bombing, manipulation, and emotional games. Eventually, I broke up with her late one night, but I forgot to block one of her friends, who then told me to harm myself. That experience taught me a painful lesson. It's important to maintain boundaries, even as a friend or a supportive person. Sometimes, it's better to wait for healthier relationships and take time to focus on yourself, rather than losing yourself trying to fix both yourself and someone else. Story 35. I did everything I could to help this woman and her 3 kids escape an abusive situation. Looking back, I realize it was really just a rebound for me, but at the time, she seemed fun, easy to be around, and everything my ex wasn't. I went all in, helping her out financially, signed for her car loan, gave her my credit cards, paid her bills. 6 months later, all my cards were maxed out, my accounts were drained, and she totaled the car while high. When I added everything up, it was over $75,000. To this day, I have no idea how she burned through all of it so quickly. Eventually, I told her I couldn't keep doing it, and she said no problem, only to give away everything from the house I had set up for her and her kids and return to her abusive ex. She's now a mess, in and out of jail, and occasionally hits me up for money. I tell her to go away, and she disappears, only to reappear when she needs more money. Story 36. I gave her a chance, but she turned out to be obsessive. She knew all about me before I even knew much about her. The second time we hung out, she wanted me to leave with her, kiss her in the parking lot, and be pretty aggressive. We had some back and forth, and I almost went for it because she was very attractive. But then came the card reading, and I realized she was deeply involved in it. After that, we went our separate ways for a while. Fast forward, we start talking again, and she invites me to a baseball game. The game was fine, but she barely paid any attention to me, which I found odd. Afterward, she invited me back to her place, and while I knew exactly what she was hoping for, I declined, got in my car, and left. Now, she's traced her family tree to witchcraft, does readings, and practices witchcraft. I definitely dodged a bullet. Story 37. I was in a relationship with a woman who initially seemed great, but things took a dark turn. We got married quickly, and things were fine at first. We started trying for a baby, but she would buy false pregnancy tests and claim she had miscarriages when she was never pregnant in the first place. I later found out she was taking morning after pills. After moving to a bigger house, she repeated the cycle of fake pregnancy tests and morning after pills, always claiming it was a miscarriage for sympathy. Eventually, we moved again due to my military orders, and while I was away, she slept with her best friend, the one she had insisted I shouldn't worry about. When I confronted her, she lied about it. Our marriage ended, and while I was deployed overseas, she got pregnant. When I returned, she tried to make me pay child support, claiming that I had been involved with her during the time she got pregnant. She fabricated messages to make it look like I had promised to support her, but I was able to prove I was deployed during that time. A DNA test confirmed that the child wasn't mine, and it turned out she had been with many other men while I was gone. She even tried to accuse me of physical and sexual abuse, but I proved her claims false. Despite all this, she continued to spread lies about me, even after our divorce. She kept my dog, a pet I had cared for, refusing to return it. Eventually, her brother threatened me and told me he had put my dog down, using her for target practice. To make matters worse, her sister, who had lived with us for a while, flirted with me, despite me making it clear I wasn't interested. Later, she got pregnant by a man who looked like me, and my ex-wife tried to accuse me of cheating by claiming the baby looked like me. A DNA test proved again that I wasn't the father. After the divorce, her sister tried to take me on a date, and when I rejected her, she falsely accused me of SA. Police later gathered evidence proving her story was a lie, and both she and my ex-wife were sued for defamation. I was cleared of all accusations, but I had already been denied a promotion in the military. Once my name was cleared, I was promoted and received back pay. Story 38. We fought constantly. Occasionally, she would hit me, and there was one time when she hit me and then bit me on my neck pretty badly. I never hit her back. Despite everything, she kept asking me to marry her, and I was still so in love with her that I was even looking for engagement rings. Our constant fighting eventually caused issues with the upstairs neighbors, and we ended up having an ongoing feud with them. We decided to move across the country together. The plan was for her to fly out ahead of me to look for jobs and apartments, while I stayed behind to finish up my job and pack everything. About a week later, she called me and broke up with me over the phone. I just told her I'd see her out there. Even after that, we continued seeing each other for about a year, even though we couldn't stand each other at that point. I'm just glad I haven't seen her since then. Story 39. I dated a woman who had bipolar disorder. When she was doing well, she was incredible, and that kept me invested for a while. But the unpredictability of her mood swings, especially after just a little alcohol, became overwhelming. 6 months after our breakup, she was married and living in a new city. I can't imagine everything was perfect for her, but I truly hope she found stability, is staying on her medication, and has found some peace. After that, I dated another woman, and after 6 months, I thought we were heading toward marriage. But things moved too slowly for her, and she started struggling with anger issues. One day, while driving, she got so enraged that she started screaming at me and drove recklessly, almost causing an accident. That was the breaking point for me. I'm just thankful to have gotten out of that situation safely and to have avoided more harm. Story 40. For years, this was the kind of relationship I kept finding myself in. It was my type. The last one, and hopefully the final one, was with a woman who worked as a dancer and had some serious mental health and substance abuse struggles. Everything seemed fine at first, but then she just disappeared one day. I honestly thought something had happened to her. I got the police involved, contacted every hospital and police station in town, and filed a missing persons report. Turns out, she was just cheating and chose to ghost me for another guy after almost 2 years of being together. The more I learned about what had really been going on, the worse it got. This relationship was the turning point that made me seek help and understand why I kept attracting this type of person. It was slowly destroying my mental well-being. Afterward, I was in a healthy relationship for several years, and we had the most mature, adult breakup when we decided to part ways. It was incredibly freeing to realize that breakups don't always have to be filled with chaos and pain. If you're like I was and tend to be drawn to troubled people, I strongly recommend getting help. It's often a two-way street. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.